For what purpose does the distinguished senator from the 26th and patient senator from the 26th rise?
Mr. President, I would ask for unanimous consent in order to have a bill introduced, read, and assigned for the first time.
Two bills or one?
Two bills.
Senate Bills 623 and 624?
Yes.
Clarification 623 and 625. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption? And these are
Senate Bill number 623, a bill by Senator Lucas of the 26th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend an act to reconstitute the Board of Education of Hancock County, approved April 5th, 1993, as amended particularly by an act approved May 6, 2013, so as to change the description of the education districts, to provide for definitions and inclusions, to provide for the continuation in office and current members, and for other purposes. Senate Bill 625, a bill by Senator Lucas of the 26th, a bill to be entitled an act to amend an act creating a Board of County Commissioners of Hancock County, approved October 5th, 1885, as amended particularly by an act approved May 6, 2013, so as to change the description of the commissioner districts, to provide for definitions and inclusions, and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Senator from the 26th has asked for unanimous consent that the rules be suspended and that Senate Bill 623 and 625 be read for the first time and referred to committee. Is there objection? The chair hears none, and both are assigned to state and local government. Ms. Secretary, can you please read the caption for... Chair recognizes the pro tem for a motion.
Mr. President, I move to take Senate Bill 601 off the table.
Ms. Secretary, can you please read the caption?
Senate Bill 601, a bill by Senators Miller of the 49th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 20 of the OCGA relating to education so as to provide for the establishment of promised scholarship accounts to be funded by the state in the amount of $6,000 per school year for each participating student, subject to appropriations and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Education and Youth recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Payne of the 54th District Chairman. Mr. President, Senators Parent of the 42nd District and others offer the following amendment number 1 to Senate Bill 601 by inserting on line 151 after F. A participating school shall administer nationally norm reference instruments in the same manner as required for public schools pursuant to OCGA Code Section 20-2-281A and report scores to the State Board of Education to be made public pursuant to OCGA Code Section 20-2-281OG. That completes your...
Amendment 2 by Jackson, second.
Mr. President, Senators Jackson of the 2nd and others offer the following amendment number 2 to Senate Bill 601 by striking lines 281 and 283 and replacing them with consideration both the impact on revenue and the impact on expenses. That completes the order, Mr. President.
We have a minority report that's been filed.
Additionally, a minority report has been filed on Senate Bill 601. That completes the order, Mr. President.
For what purpose does the senator from the 5th rise?
Mr. President, I'm requesting to excuse Senator from the 6th.
Without objection, the senator from the 6th is excused. The pro tem has moved that Senate Bill 601 be taken from the table. Is there objection? There is objection. All right, there is objection to taking Senate Bill 601 off the table. All those in favor of removing Senate Bill 601, vote yea. Opposed, nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. On the motion to take Senate Bill 601 off the table, the yeas are 27, the nays are 17, and Senate Bill 601 is taken from the table. Chair recognizes the pro tem to present Senate Bill 601.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I bring before you Senate Bill 601. Senate Bill 601 provides for the establishment of a promised scholarship in the amount of $6,000 per year per student. It authorizes the Georgia Student Finance Commission to participate and promulgate the rules and provide an annual report on the Promised Scholarship Account Program. It also provides for annual testing of participating students, and it provides for audits for the Department of Audits and Accounts. Further, the bill provides for the promise of the scholarship and is defined with directed amounts, and it's only upon funding through appropriations. And the promised scholarships are to be funded in the amount of, again, for $6,000 for the participating students. This is an opportunity for us to give students that are trapped in school systems that are underperforming an opportunity to move forward. I would appreciate your favorable considerations. I'd stand for any questions.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 10th with a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senator yield.
Yes, sir.
Senator, are these merit-based or even need-based scholarships?
No, sir.
Why aren't they?
It's not depending upon the student, it's depending on the system and what's appropriate for the student. It's not just the student and the system. Now, for instance, am very fortunate. My county, my area, my district has 3 great school systems. We have options. There are folks that are in certain school districts who don't have options.
Senator yield.
Yes, sir.
So a high-income family that's making well above whatever amount you want to put in there,
Yes, sir.
$500,000,
Yes,
can
sir.
still qualify for a $6,000 scholarship for their student?
Yes, sir. As could a minority student making very well below the poverty level, and could also qualify.
Senator, further yield.
Certainly.
Senator, isn't the purpose of moving students from one school system to the other to get a better education?
Certainly.
So if you do that and drain resources from schools that need it the most, wouldn't that further impact and hurt those schools by draining those QBE dollars?
Well, I'm not sure that I completely agree with you. You have a valid question, but I would say that it's particularly the system rather than the funding.
Senator, further yield.
Certainly.
Aren't we charged with protecting the system and ensuring there's a quality education for all of Georgia's children?
I sense that you're a no vote on this. Yes, sir, we are charged with that.
Given that responsibility, Senator, aren't we hurting those students that we are supposed to be protecting with the dollars and the resources that this state has?
I would respectfully submit that we are giving students that are trapped in a failing school system an opportunity to move elsewhere. I would also respectfully submit to you that there are plenty of schools and plenty of students who do not have options.
Senator, further yield.
Certainly.
Senator, I'm not talking about those students that you say are trapped in the failing school system, because certainly we could upgrade those school systems by putting in additional resources and additional educators and using all of their tools and weapons that are available to the state to upgrade those schools.
Certainly.
I'm talking about making this money available to the top 1% of the wage earners in this state.
Certainly, the senator knows of what he speaks. Thank you.
Senator, further yield?
Certainly.
Senator, where's the fairness in this legislation?
The fairness in this legislation is giving students that don't have opportunities. The fairness in the legislation is, in committee we were asked, what about minority students going to other schools? And the fairness would be that it would raise the minority participation, as was pointed out in the committee meeting. So I would say that the fairness in this is that everybody in this room deserves and wants their children to have the best opportunity for success. And that serves where the fairness is.
Senator Yield?
Certainly.
So doesn't it make sense with your definition of fairness to exclude the top wage earners in the state from being able to drain resources from already a strained school system?
The senator could certainly bring an amendment to that effect.
Would you support
Or you could
that
pass,
amendment?
or you could, I would not, or you could pass bring a bill to that effect.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 27th with a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pro Tem Yield.
Certainly.
Just want to follow up on the previous questions if I can. Senator, when a child goes to public school, is the expenditure on that child means tested?
No, sir.
So do you mean to tell me, Senator, that when somebody who's in the top 1% of wage earners attends a public school, that we spend the same amount of money for that child
We do.
as we do somebody who's at the bottom 1%?
We do.
So, Senator, in that way, doesn't this bill mirror what we do in our public school system?
It does, in fact.
Senator, do you further yield?
Yes, sir.
Isn't it true, Senator, that in almost every case, though, that the $6,000 that you have allocated in this bill will be less money that would be expended by the state for that student than it would should the student stay in the public schools?
That is accurate, sir. I believe the number goes up as the grades get higher.
And, Senator, there was some talk previously of taking money from public schools. Is it true, Senator, that this legislation is subject to appropriations?
That's correct.
Do you further yield?
Yes, sir.
So, Senator, isn't it true then if this is subject to appropriations, this money does not take money from failing schools any more than building a highway, buying a bottle of water for us to drink today, or painting the walls of this building?
That's accurate, sir.
Thank you, Senator.
Do you continue to yield?
Certainly.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
Certainly.
Senator, why in this legislation would we be allotting more to the private schools or the other expense in the amount of $6,000 than we allot for general education for 9th through 12th graders?
I'm sorry, Senator, I couldn't hear you.
This legislation provides more money via the voucher to private schools than is allotted for children in general education, 9th through 12th grade. Isn't it true?
I don't believe that's the case. I believe that $6,000 is less than that amount.
Isn't it true that the general education amount for 9th through 12th graders, when you're not including special needs or English as a second language, the general amount is $4,159. Isn't it true?
I'm sure that the senator knows of what she speaks. $6,000 was an average.
And isn't it true that that's a full $1,800 less than we give the public schools for these children, Senator?
You did very good math there, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 21st with a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
Yes, sir.
On lines 76 through 78, it talks about a student must be enrolled in that school for at least 6 weeks during the immediate previous school year. Can you explain that? And do you see that? So this won't, if you're currently in a private school, you cannot take part in this. You'd have to go back to a public school for 6 weeks and then ask to take advantage of this $6,000.
That would keep the public school money from being vacated out of the public school to the private school, and that's why that 6 weeks is in there.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 36th with a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Is Senator Yield?
Certainly.
Senator, have you spoken with the Georgia School Boards Association?
In a casual sense, yes.
Have you spoken with the Georgia School Superintendents
In a
Association?
casual sense, yes. And I've spoken to multiple school systems. That's correct.
Isn't it true that these are esteemed leaders who've dedicated their lives to public education and who were not allowed an opportunity to testify when your bill was heard in committee?
You know, Senator, I think that we ran short on time on the morning of the committee meeting. We did hear two bills that morning. One we heard extensive testimony from, and in fact, what we had was a lot of extensive discussion, and time ran out, and I think that is the reason that we did not hear more testimony on 601.
You're saying, if I understand you correctly, that time ran out?
Time ran out.
To hear from our State School Superintendents Association, time ran out to hear from our Georgia School Boards Association, time ran out to hear from those who, voices of teachers, time ran out to hear from local school leaders. Wouldn't it have been appropriate to get the input from that esteemed leadership across our state that represents all the superintendents, represents all the school boards? Would they not have something of value to add to a discussion about a bill that's going to strip money out of our public school system?
Senator, I appreciate your passion for your position, and thank you very much.
Do you further
Yes.
yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Isn't it true that this is a bait and switch bill that convinces people we
No.
can give you money, our public school money, and you can take it to a private school and life will be good for you and your child in that private school? Isn't that what we're selling?
That is not the interpretation nor the intent, Senator. If you interpret it that way, you're certainly entitled to your opinion.
But isn't it true? Do you know the tuition cost for private schools?
I've been
Senator?
told it's around $11,000. I don't know if that's the case or not. I've been told that casually.
That's right.
That's right. But $6,000, wouldn't you agree, Senator? Wouldn't you rather have part of something than all of nothing? So if you don't have the opportunity to go to that school and you have part of that tuition paid, wouldn't that be helpful?
If you have a lot of money, yes.
Well,
but
if you have no money, wouldn't that be helpful? What would you rather have?
Can we please
$6,000
make sure
or
the
nothing?
questions are coming from the senators in the chamber?
Certainly. I would say that the $6,000 would be better than nothing, Senator. Thank you.
Would you agree that a world-class public education system in Georgia would be the best of all worlds, instead of encouraging people with a false promise that they're going to get a $6,000 of public school money and be able to go buy a private school education? Wouldn't you prefer to see our money put in building a world-class public education system for all the children? And no, there's no means testing, and no, there's the doors are thrown wide for every Georgian to bring their children to those schools. Wouldn't that be
That is
the
certainly
best path
that is
forward?
certainly an educational utopia, Senator, and I appreciate the passion for which you deliver that statement. Thank you.
Thank you for your response.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 53rd with a question.
One last question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield,
Certainly.
aren't you responding to constituents in your district and all around Georgia in this need?
Without question, Senator, I didn't dream this up on my own. Multiple people have come to me and asked me
Yes,
about it.
in my district too, and all through Georgia. Isn't it true that your reaction to your constituents is a proven position that you have in all your endeavors here in this room?
That's absolutely the case. I don't sit at home and try to dream up legislation.
Isn't it true? I support your effort here.
Thank you, Senator.
You have
Mr.
no more
President,
questions.
I yield the well. Thank you.
Pro Tem has yielded the well. Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd to present amendment number 1. God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I'm up here to present amendment number 1. We have passed many bills and regulations required of our public schools to account for accountability, transparency in the way taxpayer funds are spent. And some of those things include test scores, open school board meetings, elected school board members. There's a whole host of things that we have required, including in Senate Bill 68 a few years ago, that started delving a little bit more into making sure that the finances of school systems were transparent. And that, is something that I think we could all agree with, because when you are dealing with taxpayer money, it is the money that belongs to all of us and to all of our constituents. So a level of accountability is to be expected and, in fact, supported. The issue that we have with this legislation, among others, is there is nothing in the legislation that would require accountability or transparency to assess financials or risk of, or even the occurrence of fraud, waste, and abuse with this particular taxpayer money that, again, is still taxpayer money owed by the taxpayers, including all of us, and then given to these schools that would not have any accountability back to the taxpayers, which I think we should all be able to conclude is problematic, especially given all of the regulations that we have on the performance and accountability of our public schools. So all Amendment 1 would do is require that any school that takes this money have to administer a nationally norm-referenced test in the same way all of our public schools are required to do, and they would then need to give these results to the State Board of Education, which would need to make these test scores public. This is one of the few things, the many things that we require of our public schools in the pursuit of excellence in education and accountability in taxpayer dollars. And so if these other private institutions are likewise going to be receiving these taxpayer dollars, we should also require of them some testing and accountability in that regard. Happy to answer any questions about Amendment number 1, and if there are none, I will take my seat, Mr. President.
Before we take questions, I just want to remind the chamber to keep your voices as low as possible on the floor while we listen to the senator in the well. Chair recognizes the majority whip with a question.
Thank you. Will you yield for questions?
I will yield, yes.
So, is it not true that all 3 of my children go to public schools in North Georgia?
I assume the senator knows of what he speaks.
And I'm going to ask this not to get personal, but is it true that your children go to a private school?
That seems like it is trying to get personal.
Well, I wanted to ask another question pertaining to that.
Are we, really?
My question is, what kind of accountability do you get from your private school today where your children attend? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's plenty of testing and accountability. It's not made public. And in this instance, these schools would be receiving public dollars. So then they have responsibility back to the taxpayers. In the same way, I mean, if you would like to elaborate on your lack of support for the myriad ways that we require public schools to make themselves accountable for public dollars, I'm sure we would all love to hear more about that.
Thank you. But as a taxpayer and as a parent, you feel that the private school is accountable to you for the education of your children and for the money that you spend each year for that?
Senator, the private school would be accountable in some ways to the parent, but they are not accountable to the taxpayers, and that's the distinction.
So it seems to me like it would be the same. How would it be different? If you're a parent, you're paying thousands of dollars. I heard the number $11,000 per year that you're paying for your children. How do you not feel like that's accountability? If you're making that investment in your children's future, the same way this bill would be doing, because it's all taxpayers' money, it's coming through the Department of Education, through the budgeting process. Under this bill, it would be paid for in a different way, but it's still coming out of the taxpayer's pocket. But you feel like the accountability measure is in place at your school and you're satisfied with that?
There's not an accountability measure in private schools for taxpayers or their dollars or the performance of the students therein, the way that there is in in public schools. And so I think, the distinction that you're drawing, falls apart when you start to talk about what is the purpose of public education and what is the purpose of all the dollars that we appropriate for public education for our students. One of the charges that we have is to use our public dollars to provide the best education that we can for as many students as we can. Sure. Is it perfect? No, it's never going to be perfect. But we are talking about 1.7, million school children, and I'll just throw in there real quick that only in the past in the past 20 years, we've only fully funded our basic formula twice. So we do have a $10 billion deficit over the past 2 decades in that funding under our own formula. So where the analysis begins to fall apart is when you are saying this family is probably still paying property taxes, but they've chosen to pay tuition. That is a personal analysis by that family. What we're talking about when we talk about public dollars and public schools and money that would flow through this bill is taxpayer money writ large for the community writ large, in the same way that we talk about funding public schools. So you're talking about a micro analysis. I'm talking about the macro analysis of what is the purpose of public education, how we fund it, and what sort of accountability there are to taxpayers.
Will you further yield?
Sure.
Can you share some reasons why a parent would choose to take their child to a private school, whether it's your issue with your family or others?
Well, I'm glad you asked about that.
Thank you.
So that is another one of the problems with this bill. And that is the illusion that individuals who don't have the family means to pay tuition would be able to utilize it to escape a school that, for whatever reason, they don't like, or think for whatever reason another school might be a better option for their child. Now, of course, let's set aside the fact that research does not demonstrate in the use of private school vouchers in enhanced performance out of students. So let's leave that aside. But what's really problematic here is this illusion, because 71% of Georgia private schools have tuition requirements that are above $6,000 a year. And in fact, in the metro Atlanta area, it's far higher. So I raised with the author of the bill in committee that if you're really talking about being able to enable school choice in Atlanta, say, let's just talk about inside the perimeter where hundreds of thousands of people live. If you're really trying to enable school choice within the perimeter, well, you're probably going to need to spend, and then you got to talk about transportation funding and the ability to actually access these dollars, because transportation can be an impediment for a lot of families, you would concede. So, you're really talking about more like $25,000 to $30,000, and then many families have multiple children. So, right away you're going to need to be talking about $100,000 per family if you are really trying to enable true school choice within the perimeter here in Metro Atlanta. And given that this bill would only provide $6,000, you can see how these promises are completely illusory. If you are really going to try to enable lower income families to exercise true choice, this bill would be means tested, and it would accomplish that instead of allowing people that already send their children to private schools, and can clearly afford it because they're doing it already, to just take the money that is right now supporting the 1.7 million children in the public schools and just shift it right over to the private schools, and is obviously completely wide open for individuals who don't intend to send their kids to public school and have the means to afford private school. So in that sense, you're really helping very, very few people who are a little bit on the bubble wall of being able to afford tuition, while hurting a much larger number of children and helping people that actually are very affluent and already have the means to pay full tuition.
Senator, my question was, why do you choose to take your children to a private school here in Atlanta? And I don't think you answered that question, but you talked a lot about cost and affordability and all that. But if I support this amendment that you proposed, will you vote for this bill then?
Well, let me go back a second, Senator. My answer was because the reason I discussed all that is because this bill doesn't do that. This bill doesn't allow every family in Georgia to say, I'm not happy with my public school for whatever reason, so I will now be able to choose whatever school I want. It simply doesn't do that. Instead, it's going to be used a lot more by individuals that already have the means and are already paying private school tuition. And so that's a really critical point with this bill, because it makes a lot of the arguments for it completely fall apart, or at least it exposes them.
I'll disagree with you on that, and I'll give you a couple of reasons why. In my district, the household income is probably $55,000 to $60,000 a year. Now, you probably spend that in Atlanta for a nanny, but the people in my district live on that in a year. If their children are not getting the education that they choose that they want, and their parent thinks they should get, why should we not try to help them to go to a school to where they can get that help? And if we give them $6,000 a year, that may not make it to 11, but there may be a school in North Georgia or Middle Georgia or South Georgia that you can do it for $8,000 or $7,000 a year with scholarships. I'll bet you that parent will work harder to make that extra $2,000 a year for that child, because it's that important to them. If they're making $1 million a year, that's not going to be a big issue to them. Neither would this.
Senator, I'm going to need you to phrase that in the form of a question.
But isn't it true that we should be helping the middle class people as much as we are the upper class or the lower class? So this bill would help the middle class. Is that not a true statement?
I mean, helping the middle class is certainly important, but when we talk about achievement and what we need to build a skilled workforce here in Georgia, we need to be talking about all kids. And, 71% of these schools cost a lot more than $6,000. So I think right there on its face, it sort of gives the lie to the whole notion that this bill would do what you're hoping to accomplish. I mean, it might for a few families, of course, I'll concede that, but the much larger percentage, it won't.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Senator.
Do you continue to yield?
I think I'll yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. Chair recognizes the senator from the 2nd to present amendment number 2.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I present to you amendment number 2 on Senate Bill 601. On page 12, I want to strike lines 281 to 283 and just have it read consideration of both the impact on revenue and the impact of expenses. And it's very simple. If we don't strike that, under this bill in its current form, they must say they're saving money even when they don't. They must say they're saving money even when they don't. It says even if the public school is losing students or students does not reduce its spending. So it's a very simple amendment. I urge that you pass this simple amendment just to make this legislation read a little better. Mr. President, if there's no questions, I yield the well.
You don't appear to have any questions. Chair recognizes the senator from the 36th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise to speak against Senate Bill 601, authored by my friend from the 49th. I believe we're going down a dangerous path here, and we need to sit up and take notice before supporting this bill and putting the Senate on record for a very ill-conceived voucher bill that yet again is another false flag signaling to the voucher crowd, and there's a movement that's funded by the right wing in this country promoting private school vouchers, believe you me. Let's not pass a signaling bill in an election year to serve crass political purposes. Let's stay on focus about how are we serving our public school population, how are we building a world-class education system, a public system open to all in Georgia. And I'll tell you this, when you continue to suck money out of the education budget, and as you heard from the last speaker, $10 billion and counting. It's not an attractive posture for the majority party to be consistently doing this, because the Democrats and the Republicans and the independents and the libertarians all send in large numbers their children to public schools. I was privileged to have a great education in the public school system. My two sons have a great education in the public education system of Atlanta. I'm not going to support, and I urge you not to support, a bill that's fiscally irresponsible. It takes taxpayer money and it pours it into private schools with limited oversight and limited accountability. And these types of voucher programs have been abused in state after state where they're implemented, including right here in Georgia. You know, the private schools, the teachers don't even have to have a college degree. Did y'all know that? That's right. That's right. And people set up all kinds of little schools. The teachers are not held to a standard. We hold our teachers and our schools and our superintendents and our principals and our school boards to standards of performance in the public school. That's not the case in the private schools. So it's bad use of education dollars to be passing out these vouchers. But then we're told, don't worry, because it's only going to happen if it's put into our budget. It's not funded. So they're saying, don't worry about passing this bill because it's not going to mean anything anyway because it's never going to be funded. That's what I call a false flag, where you're saying this bill's not going to hurt us fiscally because it's not funded. Here's the language. It says it won't, until you fund it, it won't be implemented. Well, then why are you passing it? The bill was passed using, lamentably, a bad process. It was rushed through committee. We heard the author of the bill say we didn't have time to hear from the people who came to testify. You're taking money out of our public education system, and you don't have time to hear from the superintendents of schools, the statewide association. You don't have time in your committee to hear from the school board association? Again, as I say, professionals who've dedicated their lives to working in the public education and educating our children, and you don't have time in a committee hearing to let them give their testimony. That is grounds alone for voting against this bill. I don't care what party you're in. That's grounds for, and how many of us have listened to our school superintendent back home? I bet you've gotten some calls from some school superintendents back home in your counties. Yeah, they're not loving this. And I don't know why you want to continue to have the majority party build on its reputation that we underfund our public education system. And we're dedicated to vouchers. And I'm telling you, you may deny it if you want to, but it is clear as a bell. And I'll take schools in my own, and neighborhoods in my own district. Low-income parents who are invested totally in seeking the best educational opportunities for their children. And they hear private school, and it's a gold-plated promise. And yet $6,000 won't buy you a private school education. In 71% of the private schools cost twice that at least, if not $17,000 or $19,000. So it's a false flag. It's instead of investing in world-class schools, world-class teachers, world-class education to educate all of our students, we're here waving this false flag saying you can get $6,000 and get your kid in private school. So go for it. Well, lots of luck. Do you know when you get in a private school, they can throw you out at the end of the semester and don't have to meet any standards about why they're not going to keep your student in their school. They can bring in teachers that don't have college educations, and yet we're selling this, that this is a way to, a good alternative to our public school system, to be using public school dollars for private schools that don't have accountability, that don't have oversight, and that don't require their teachers to have college educations? I'm just not understanding what's good about this bill. And I say to you, are you comfortable voting for something that the members of the public, the educators, and the professionals who came down twice and waited to testify on 2 different days about this bill and share their experience as lifetime educators, and they didn't get recognized? When you won't let somebody who's definitely has some expertise to draw on and some life experience to draw on, and you won't let them testify, and you say, we ran out of time. Well, school superintendents of Georgia, listen up, wake up. They're passing a voucher bill down here, but they didn't have time to hear from your school board association. They didn't have time to hear from the state superintendents. I repeat that because it bears repeating. It's very significant. And all of us have public school folks back home in our districts that are dedicated professionals, and they are in shock and dismay that this kind of bill is being so carelessly handled and promoted. And I'll tell you, the rural schools rely on more heavily on state funds than the rest of the state. Georgia schools are already struggling to pay for costs that increase while revenue remains flat, and vouchers would exacerbate the struggles, particularly in rural Georgia, that our education system has in delivering the best possible education for the students. So think about it. This is one you're gonna live with. This is one when you go home, your public school folks are gonna say, did you vote for that bill to take $6,000 and hand that off to a family to go off somewhere? And the public school dollars, our tax dollars, and you have no accountability for how those schools run their operation? They're gonna ask you. I would say to you, every one of us that represents educators in our communities are gonna be questioned. Why would you support a bill like this? I think it's an irresponsible bill, and we did not allow time for educators to weigh in on it, and the math. I'll tell you, I don't know where some of the people maybe went to school that did the math for this bill, but the math ain't right. We spend between $4,000 and $5,000 on a student in public schools. That $6,000 is an average, and to say that it's right for us to pass out $6,000 vouchers when our kids in public schools and the general education stream of students don't even get $5,000, less than that. So I'm going to stop here, and I know you'll be very glad because people want to move on with our agenda, but I would urge you to stop and think. Why can't we do better? Why can't we do more? We just don't need to catch up our public education system, our students and the families that depend on public education, to catch them up in this election year bill that says, we support vouchers. No, you don't. It's not even funded in here. But let's not spread misinformation. Let's invest in our public schools. Let's listen to our educators, and let's do the best that we can to build a world-class public education system and stop draining the dollars off with bills like this. If there are any questions, I will entertain them. If not, I will yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 34th with a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator yield?
Yes, I yield.
Senator, is it not true that this senator served on the local school board back in 1990, whatever? Is that
yes,
not true?
Yes, that is true. And when I first met you, you had recently completed your service on the school board. And there are many people in here that served on school boards before they came to the state senate. What a great point you're making. Thank you.
Senator, I have a question.
Yes.
When the last time Georgia fully funded QBE?
I'll tell you, that's a numbers game, and that's a figures game, and we know that figures can lie, and liars can figure. So there's many answers to when's the last time. Many answers to when's the last time we fully funded QBE. Let me just say, it's been a minute. It's been a minute.
And Senator, before I let you go, I just want to make it clear that even though we make attempts to do things that we may feel is the right thing is not the right thing for everybody if it's not inclusive. And what we are attempting to do now, though, is continue to deplete the public school system as opposed to trying to bring all of Georgia up to date. Is that not true?
Thank you, Senator, for that great question. And I truly, firmly believe that that's the case. That you keep going down this road of vouchering and take this public school money, put it in this little voucher, put it in this little voucher. Oh, here's a nice, attractive little voucher. You can't vote against this. You know what you're doing? You're leaving behind in the public school system children whose families simply do not have the access and the resources to move their child, but you're impoverishing the very schools that they depend on to educate their children. So let's build a robust public education system that serves everybody, as opposed to continuing to look for ways to take public school dollars and put them over in private schools and for profit pockets. Thank you for your question, Senator. But no further questions.
You have no more questions.
Thank you. I'll yield the well.
We have a third amendment that's been introduced. Mr. Secretary, can you please read amendment number 3?
Senators Brass of the 28th and others offer the following amendment number 3 to amend Senate Bill 601 by, on line 157, strike the period after the word year and add or the equivalent FTE minus the local 5 mil share, whichever is less. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 28th to present his amendment number 3.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I rise and bring you this amendment. And simply what I'm trying to do here is ensure that the state's going to spend the same amount on the voucher as it would if the kids stayed in school. And that's really what this amendment does. It's really language that the senator from the 27th did on SB 173 that we voted on back in 2019. And so I encourage, if anybody's curious on how this vote's going to turn out, you might go back and look at that, and I'll give you a pretty accurate whip count on that. But simply, I mean, I've got my 4 primary counties that I represent. Heard County, their state FTE is about $5,362, and really the base amount's closer to about $2,784 per student. Coweta's $4,621. Troup County's $5,007, and in Carroll County, Carroll Schools is the only one that's over that $6,000. And so I'm simply just trying to parallel what that state FTE is, and to me the $6,000 is too much, and it really does hurt my folks like Heard County, and I certainly don't want to do that. I do believe in this legislation in principle, and I want to get it to where I can vote for it. But the only way I can do that is if we're going to make sure that the state is spending the same amount in that voucher as it does if that kid stays in school. With that, I'll yield for questions, or I can yield the well.
You don't appear to have any questions.
Thank you. I encourage your favorable consideration of Amendment 3.
A 4th amendment has been introduced. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption to amendment number 4?
Senators Owl of the 48th and others offer the following amendment number 4 to Senate Bill 601 by inserting after line 200, G, appropriations pursuant to this code section shall not be authorized for any fiscal year in which the General Assembly did not appropriate the full amount of funding provided for the code section 20-2-161. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 48th to present amendment number 4.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is really quite a simple, straightforward amendment. It simply says that we should attend to our constitutional duty of fully funding our public schools, and that if the QBE is not fully funded for any given year, that we should not be funding the measure in this bill. And with that, I yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. The chair recognizes the senator from the 27th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. As my neighbor mentioned, I did carry a similar bill a couple of years ago. I commend the author for bringing this bill here today. I want to correct the record on a few things, address amendment number 1, which I had a chance to clarify with the senator from the 42nd, and then talk a little bit about the value proposition that is within school choice. It was mentioned earlier, one of the earlier speakers said this is going to siphon money away and give it to people who are already attending private school. That simply is not true. This bill requires that somebody qualify for an FTE QBE count in the prior year before any money would go to them, so the state would be funding them. So whether it's the $6,000 or what the senator from the 28th brought forward, either way, you have to attend and hit a QBE count. Somebody asked the question, when did we last fund QBE? Well, last year, and we will this year. And one thing that I think is interesting, that I did not know this until somebody informed me of it, the school boards in the state of Georgia, this is pretty stunning, have more money in reserves than the state of Georgia. I want to repeat that. The school boards in the state of Georgia have more money in reserves than the entire state of Georgia itself. So the conventional thinking that these school districts are always struggling for funding is true only to the extent that all of government is always struggling for funding. And at the moment, no governments anywhere are struggling for funding because we have printed and injected so much liquidity into the market via actions of our federal government under 2 separate administrations. It was stated that it's a myth that this is going to be helpful to students. One of the great things is we have had the opportunity to see how helpful this will be to students because we have the special needs scholarship. The senator who spoke of this being a myth that it would be helpful back when the special needs scholarships passed about a decade ago, spoke about how awful that was going to be, and there was a lot of doom and gloom at that time as well. But the reality is we have lots of stories of real children and real parents who have exercised this voucher program to put their children into real schools, to get them a real education, to prepare them to be a real part of the workforce here in Georgia. So there's nothing that is a myth about that. I do want to talk about Amendment 1 for a second. I did speak with the senator from the 42nd about this. Basically, what she is trying to do here is have standardized testing and transparency to the State Board of Education around that testing. If you look in the bill on lines 255 through 258, it mandates that there will be administered nationally norm reference tests that will be given to every student who is in a private school through this program. Lines 259 through 261 outlines that those same tests will be administered to those who are homeschooled. Lines 270 to 272 outlines that the results of those tests will be provided to the members of the General Assembly, which I think is probably the one difference between the amendment and this bill is that the amendment requires it be provided to the State Board of Education. This requires that it be provided to the General Assembly. So that would be one difference. But please don't think that there is no testing in this bill. There is testing, and there is transparency and accountability in this bill. And I think that's one thing that's important to talk about as well, is the difference between transparency and accountability. Our public schools do have transparency, but I think that there's some questions lately around how much accountability they have. If you had a student in Flint, Michigan, for example, who still today could not go to school in person because the schools are closed for COVID, I think, and they're closed for COVID, by the way, indefinitely, I think you might have some questions around the accountability piece. This ultimately gets to funding of public education. A lot of that was discussed. Public education is block funded. Is not block funded. Public education is funded by head count. So there's this idea that we're taking money away and that we're sending it to private schools. The reality is, the way this bill is written, the student who had the QBE received state funding. If they stayed in public school, they would still receive state funding. If they left public school, the school would not receive that state funding. So there's a little bit of a misconception here around that. And there's also, frankly, a misconception around the reality of the state portion versus the local portion. The state portion of funding, and this depends on what your local tax digest is, but it's about half. And then about 40% comes from local tax digest, and about 10% comes from the federal government. And for that 10%, the federal government gets to have all sorts of tentacles into our education, but that's a different story for a different day. We have a lot of data around the success of programs like these, and we have a lot of polling around programs like these. And a recent poll that I saw showed 74% support across party lines. 70% of Democrats, when asked, support bills like this. 80% of Republicans support bills like this. 73% of African American parents support bills like this. 69% of Hispanic American parents support bills like this, and 70% of Asian parents support bills like this. So why would the establishment oppose it? Why would politicians oppose it? And I think for that answer, we need to look no further than just down south of us in Florida. And the answer is politics. There's a governor down there that many of us may have heard of. His name's Ron DeSantis. He's the same age of me. He's quite more accomplished than I am. But I would posit to say, were it not for school choice, that nobody in this chamber would know his name. The Wall Street Journal referenced the election between Ron DeSantis and Andrew Gillum, a state twice the size of Georgia, in which Governor DeSantis beat Andrew Gillum by 1/2 the margin of Governor Kemp's victory over Stacey Abrams. So very, very razor-thin margin in that election. And the Wall Street Journal talks about 100,000 African-American moms whose children are the beneficiaries of the school choice program in Florida. And those 100,000 African-American moms 4 years ago crossed party lines to vote for Ron DeSantis. Why did they do that? Because their children saw the benefit of a program just like this one. And Andrew Gillum, he was going to get rid of the program. Ron DeSantis has kept the program. So if you look at the polling data and you say when 70% of people support something, but the establishment and the Democrats oppose it, and you ask yourself why, the answer is simple: politics. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair recognizes the senator from the 40. For what purpose does the senator from the 25th rise? He waves. Does the senator from the 42nd wish to speak from the well?
We'll have the minority.
What's she say? Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? The chair sees none. The chair would like to recognize the senator from the 42nd to speak to the minority report.
Thank you, Mr. President. We've already been over a number of points about the bill. Just want to reiterate a few things in closing. It's already been noted that this bill was not vetted. There was no testimony permitted to be taken in committee. It's been noted and discussed that there was a miscalculation as far as how much money would actually be going with the child via this voucher. It would be a full $1,800 more than that child would receive from the state were they in the public school. So it sends a clear message that the General Assembly, the government of Georgia, favors private schools over public schools, the ones we're constitutionally mandated to set up, provide, and support. And that just seems certainly upside down. If we were going to support one more than the other with a higher amount, it should obviously be the public schools. The amount, so say 42 children used this voucher, just to use one example, the public schools would lose $175,000, and the private schools would actually end up getting $252,000. So you can see quite a large discrepancy on that. In addition, moving children from public schools to private schools does not decrease overhead costs. The only way that it actually could have a meeting on the loss of revenue and loss of expenses is if the exact right number of children left, that you can eliminate a classroom and a grade, for example, and eliminate those two jobs, the teacher and the paraprofessional. Then I suppose you could make the claim that the schools saved money, but the reality is even under that scenario, you still have the fixed costs related to the building and administration, the cafeteria workers, the bus drivers, and everything. So under really no scenario is it possible that these schools could be counted as saving money. And of course, in reality, it's totally illogical to think that in, I'll use a school name of a school in my district, Maryland Elementary School, you have exactly 24 first graders who take the voucher and then they leave, and so then they eliminate the teachers that would have taught in that particular classroom in that grade. That's obviously strains credulity to even think that that could occur. Vouchers divert students randomly, in other words, and the teachers and classroom equipment remain, and the classroom will just have less resources due to the diversion of the $6,000 per number of child. Public voucher programs end up being programs for parents who already intend to send their children to private school and have the means to do so. I already made this argument up here today, but it is not one that I'm making alone. That was a quote from Lisa Morgan, the president of the Georgia Association of Educators. I received a lot of emails from individuals who came twice to testify to this legislation in committee and were denied the opportunity to do so on 2 successive committee hearing days before this bill was passed out of committee. So I just wanted to share a few things that these individuals, had sent. Over the years, the Senate has voted to dramatically increase the accountability of school boards for the use of public money and to allow public participation. Senate Bill 68. Test score accountability is now culture. Even if you are in favor of vouchers in principle, support for this bill means you can't be in favor of transparency and accountability and this bill at the same time. The reason we have always been told that we needed this accountability is that the principles of transparency and accountability are there to protect the children and protect the taxpayers. So don't we have a responsibility to check how the dollars we spend are used and how much bang we got for those dollars? Even if we're saying that vouchers are needed to give children more opportunity and educational freedom, we still have the responsibility to check to see how each and every private school used these funds. The voters should have a right to check. Private schools have a choice on whether they participate in voucher programs and take public dollars. If they choose to take the money, they should be required to trade their acceptance of millions of dollars for the same level of transparency and accountability that this body has required of public schools. Private schools do not have elected board members accountable to the people who pay for the vouchers, have to post their individual school audits and budgets to the public so that the public can see for themselves if there is fraud, waste, or abuse of funds, have to undergo financial training. It's another bill we've done since I've been here. Have to subject themselves to anti-nepotism laws and a code of ethics, or have specific consequences and interventions for failure to academically perform. If we invest millions of dollars in any educational program, we must have the above measures of accountability to protect the children and the taxpayers. Public schools have been asking for more counselors, nurses, and transportation funds for a decade, and the answer has always been, we don't have the money. Well, now that we have the money and unique opportunity to help the systems give our children these vital resources, we're still talking about diverting millions of dollars to go to private schools, most of which will help affluent families rather than the hundreds of thousands of students who need resources in rural communities all over Georgia. To drill down specifically on just one of those metrics, counselors. The accepted metric for counselors in public schools is 1 per every 250 children. Now, I don't know about you, but managing 250 kids as a counselor still sounds like a huge caseload to me. And certainly one, even at that level, where it would be very difficult to do your job to advise children that are not from families who have been to college before, that need a little extra counseling on their next step, whether it be higher education or the job market. It would basically be impossible to do that well for 250 kids. But our ratio is nowhere near 1 to 250 kids. Our ratio instead is 1 counselor per 430 children. So why, when we're already falling short on so many things that we claim we care about, like, do we care about building a strong workforce here in Georgia? Do we care that in the next decade, the number of jobs that require some form of higher ed is going way up? How are children who don't have, and I've seen this in my own family, who don't have a parent or guardian or other trusted relative to walk them through the process of applying for college, how are they supposed to even start at the tender age of 17 or 18 to access the type of life that we ourselves are saying is needed when we're only providing 1 counselor for every 450 children? We say that we need to do a better job on screening and assisting children with dyslexia. We're not putting the money into that in a way that would yield the results that we say we want. We don't even have enough children who have the financial means to access higher ed that we need to, that we say, that we have reports that are put out talking about complete college Georgia. Being in this chamber really is enough to make you think like you lost your mind. How can people stand up here and laud all those things and then come and present us with this? It's like, have I lost it? There was a lot of other testimony that I received, Mr. President, from PAGE, Professional Association of Georgia Educators, from the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, from the Georgia Association of Educational Leaders, Georgia Association of Educators, on and on. But I see my time is running short. I think this bill has just not been appropriately vetted for such a monumental change. Doesn't do anything for the kids in rural Georgia. And with that, I ask you to vote no, and I'll yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. The chair recognizes the pro tem to close the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I fear the question and the disinformation about audits and money, and this is about children and opportunity, not about adults and money. This is a vote for parents and a vote for children. This is a vote that in your district, it may not be applicable. It may not be a problem, but in other districts, it is a problem. We've got several amendments. I will remind the ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, when the question came up on testing, if you'll direct your attention to line 250, I think you'll answer that question. The question came up on audits, these are all part of the proposed amendments. If you'll direct your attention to line 238, you'll see that's addressed. And you'll see it's also addressed further on line 291. I urge you to vote yes for the measure and do that for children to have opportunity and to have options. Mr. President, I yield the will. Thank you.
The pro tem has closed the debate. We will now take up the amendments. We'll start with amendment number 1 and work our way through it. Is there objection to adoption of amendment number 1? There is objection. All those in favor of amendment number 1 vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the adoption of amendment number 1, the yeas are 26 and nays are 23, and amendment number 1 is adopted. We'll now take up amendment number 2. Is there objection to adoption of amendment number 2? There is objection. All those in favor of amendment number 2 vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the adoption of amendment number 2, the yeas are 24, the nays are 25, and amendment number 2 is lost. We will now take up amendment number 3 from the senator from the 28th. Is there objection to adoption of amendment number 3? The chair hears no objection, and amendment number 3 is adopted. We'll now take up amendment number 4 from the senator from the 48th. Is there objection to adoption of amendment number 4? There is objection. All those in favor of adoption of amendment number 4 vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the adoption of amendment number 4, the yeas are 47, the nays are 2, and amendment number 4 is adopted. We'll now take up the underlying measure. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill as amended. All those in favor vote yea. Opposed, nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 20, the nays are 29. This bill, having failed to receive the requisite constitutional majority, as amended, is therefore lost. Chair recognizes the senator from the 51st.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we take Senate Bill 558 off the table.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption?
Senate Bill 558, a bill by Senators Gucci of the 51st and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 32 of the OCGA relating to the Department of Transportation so as to amend notice provisions relative to meetings for the election of board members, to provide for negotiations and requests for proposals relative to public-private partnerships and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Transportation recommends that this bill be passed by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Ginn of the 47th District Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Transportation Committee offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 558, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 32 of the OCGA relating to the Department of Transportation so as to amend notice provisions relative to meetings for the election of board members, to provide for negotiations and requests for proposals relative to public-private partnerships and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Senator from the 51st has moved that Senate Bill 558 be taken off the table. Is there objection? The chair hears none, and it's taken from the table. The chair recognizes the majority whip to present Senate Bill 558.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, this bill should not take an hour to debate. It's real simple. This is our annual housekeeping bill for the Department of Transportation. It's got 3 sections in it. The first section deals with how we notify the legislators when there's an election for a school DOT board member position. In the past, we have historically sent that notice to you by certified mail or by U.S. mail. This bill changes that at the request of Ledge Council to notify you by your email at your Senate office. So that should be a little cleaner, more efficient, and takes less time. Section number 2 is just cleanup language dealing with how we put out RFPs and how those
Senator,
RFPs...
if you could hold on for a minute.
Yes, sir.
If I could get the Senate's attention and ask all of you to cease your audible conversations and give your attention to the Senator Noel.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
It's important legislation. I know everybody's interested in it. Section 2 deals with the cleanup language in the RFP process for bids and procurement. And Section 3 deals with the protection of data on drivers that will be on our state routes and our U.S. routes in Georgia. Data is obtained through the DOT by IP addresses similar to what you see on your with cell phones. This information would be protected, would not be subject to the Freedom of Information Act. It's dealing strictly with them being able to determine what traffic counts are and congestion relief on projects that are under consideration for expansion and development. I'm happy to take questions or yield the well.
You don't appear to have any questions.
Thank you so much.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Bill 558? The chair sees none. The question's on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee sub is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute? All those in favor vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 53, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Chair recognizes the senator from the 53rd for a motion to take Senate Bill 167 off the table.
Ditto, Mr. President. I move to take 167, the Senate bill, off the table.
Mr. Secretary, please read the caption.
Senate Bill 167, a bill by Senators Orrick of the 36 and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 47 of the OCGA relating to the Employees Retirement System of Georgia so as to provide for semi-annual post-retirement benefit adjustments for all beneficiaries of the Employees Retirement System of Georgia and for their purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Retirement recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Robertson of the 29th District Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Retirement Committee offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 167, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 6 of Article 8 of Chapter 2 of Title 47 of the OCGA relating to judges of the Supreme Court, judges of the Court of Appeals, and their employees so as to decrease the age eligibility for retirement benefits for appellate court judges and for other purposes. Additionally, an actuarial report has been filed on both the bill and its substitute. That completes the order, Mr. President.
The well-prepared senator from the 53rd has asked that Senate Bill 167 be taken off the table. Is there objection? The chair hears none. It's taken off the table. The chair recognizes the senator from the 53rd, our esteemed Rules Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. I only need 29 votes this time. Maybe you'll help me. But this is an easy bill. This brings parity to the Supreme Court and the appellate court judges. All the court systems in Georgia, retirement, believe it or not, is 60 years old. And this brings them to that as well. It doesn't include their employees, just the judges. Mr. President, I would love to answer a lot of questions tomorrow, but I'll be glad to if there are any today, and I yield the way if they're not.
You have no questions.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, save me from myself, and I appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Bill 167? The chair sees none. The questions on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agree in the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 46 and nays are 3. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Chair recognizes the senator from the 14th for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request that Senate Bill 353 be removed from the table.
Ms. Secretary, can you please read the caption?
Senate Bill 353, a bill by Senators Thompson of the 14th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 17 of Chapter 5 of Title 40 of the OCGA relating to criminal procedure and driver's licenses, respectively, so as to provide for a judicial discretion in suspension of a driver's license upon failure to appear for certain traffic violations and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Public Safety recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Albers of the 56th District Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Public Safety offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 353, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 17 and Chapter 5 of Title 40 of the OCGA relating to criminal procedure and driver's licenses, respectively, so as to provide for judicial discretion in suspension of driver's license upon failure to appear for certain traffic violations and for other purposes. That completes the ordinance, Mr. President.
Senator from the 14th has asked for Senate Bill 353 to be taken from the table. Is there objection? Chair hears none, and it's removed from the table. The chair recognizes the senator from the 14th to present Senate Bill 353.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. We have a task force, the Systemic Racial Inequality Task Force, that meets, and there are several bills that have come out of this. Senate bill that the senator from the 17th carried last year and we got passed. This is another piece of legislation. It's bipartisan. In Georgia, a driver's license means a job. If you have one, you can work. If you don't, 80% of Georgians drive to work, and half of Georgians lose their licenses, lose their jobs. It's that simple. The single largest way Georgians lose their license is through failure to appear in court to adjudicate a traffic ticket. It's 105,000 licenses each year are lost that way. Georgians miss court and lose their licenses for a number of reasons. Some are working and cannot get time off. Others are full-time caregivers. And people get sick. We are emerging from a pandemic that makes it very difficult. Under Georgia law, there is no way to stop a suspension when Georgians failure to appear, no matter what the reason. Senate Bill 353 is a measure to give courts discretion to consider the totality of circumstances and decide whether a license should be suspended and reinstated when a person fails to appear in court. Ladies and gentlemen, you can see on your desks, we have bipartisan support from municipal judges, from the chambers, and from many of the faith groups. With that, Mr. President, I'll yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. The question is on adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is therefore adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee of the bill, which is favorable to the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none. The question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor vote yea. Opposed vote nay. Mr. Secretary, unlock the machines. On the passage of the bills, the yeas are 50, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Recognize the senator from the 29th.
I rise to ask for unanimous consent to remove Senate Bill 470 from the table.
Mr. Secretary, if you read the caption.
Senate Bill 470, a bill by Senators Robertson of the 29th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 13 of Chapter 1 of Title 7 of the OCGA relating to licensing of mortgage lenders and mortgage brokers, so as to provide for different categories of felony convictions for purposes of investigations of mortgage loan originator applicants and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Banking and Financial Institutions recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Brass of the 28th District Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Banking and Financial Institutions offer the following substitute to Senate Bill 470, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 13 of Chapter 1 of Title 7 of the OCGA relating to licensing of mortgage lenders and mortgage brokers so as to provide for a definition to remove agent and covered employee to the list of persons for whom the Department of Banking and Finance shall not issue or revoke a license because of felony conviction and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
The senator from the 29th has moved to take Senate Bill 470 off the table. Is there objection? The senator from the 28th has objected. He waves off. The senator from the 29th is recognized to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd also like to thank the chairman from the 29th for signing off on this when his committee heard this legislation. SB 470 is a continuation of criminal justice reform. The original bill was, the intent of the original bill was to follow the federal law by the letter, giving individuals who had been convicted of felonies the opportunities to work at certain jobs within the mortgage industry. And after talking with banking, what we did is we added a new definition as covered employee. What this does is an individual convicted of certain felonies, once they are released from prison, they have opportunities to apply for a job in the mortgage industry as long as those jobs do not involve mortgage origination functions and jobs of handling money, if you will. There are many, many jobs in the mortgage industry that these individuals could seek out and could find, but with the restrictions prior to SB 470, there were no jobs, and that includes the job of custodian or anything else. So if we really want to continue to create off-ramps for individuals who have made mistakes, committed felonies, been convicted, paid their debt to society, then these types of bills, this type of legislation needs to be brought forward and supported in order to deal with recidivism here in the state of Georgia. And with that, Mr. President, I'll yield for any questions, and if not, I will yield the well.
Senator, you have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I encourage everyone to please support.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? The chair, senator from the 28th, would you like to speak for or against the measure? The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed, vote nay. Mr. Secretary, if you would unlock the machines. On the passage of the bill, yeas are 47, the nays are 1. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is thereby passed. I recognize the senator from the 53rd.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I ask unanimous consent to pull Senate Bill 267 off the table.
Is there objection? Hearing none, please read the caption.
Senate Bill 267, a bill by Senators Rahman of the 5th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 3 of Title 47 of the OCGA relating to the teachers' retirement system of Georgia, so to provide that a retired member who elected an optional retirement allowance that included one or more named beneficiaries shall be eligible to change any of such named beneficiaries under certain conditions and limitations and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Retirement recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Robertson of the 29th District Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Retirement Committee offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 267, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 23 of Title 47 of the OCGA relating to the Georgia Judicial Retirement System so as to provide for credible service in the judicial retirement system on a 1-for-2 basis for transfers of creditable service from the appellate court judge's plan of the employees' retirement system of Georgia and for other purposes. Additionally, there are actuarial reports filed for both the bill and its substitute. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to removing Senate Bill 267 from the table? Hearing none, the senator from the 53rd is recognized to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. My colleagues, I only need 29 votes, just to make sure you knew that. And this is a continuation of the Supreme Court and Appellate Court's needs. This simply allows them to move their retirement from either the employee's retirement system to the judicial retirement system, which is logical. If Spock was up here, he would tell you this is a logical move. So I'll answer any questions, Mr. President. In fact, I just can't wait for the questions, or I can yield the well, and I appreciate your vote.
I know you're terribly disappointed, but you have no questions, Senator.
Thank you, my colleagues. I would like to fall in love again with you, so I appreciate your vote. Live long and prosper.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? The question is on adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is thereby adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee the favorable passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. Mr. Secretary, unlock the machines. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 40, the nays are 9, and this bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is thereby passed. Recognize the senator from the 20th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent to take Senate Bill 581 off the table.
The senator from the 20th has made a motion to remove Senate Bill 581 from the table. Is there objection? Hearing none, it's removed from the table. Mr. Secretary, if you read the caption.
Senate Bill 581, a bill by Senators Walker of the 20th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 4 of Title 44 of the OCGA relating to determination of boundaries so as to designate the most recent systems of plane coordinates for defining and stating geographic positions within the state of Georgia as the Georgia State Plane Coordinate System and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Science and Technology recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Dolezal, the 27th District Chairman. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Senator from the 20th is recognized to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this is maybe one of the most significant pieces of legislation that you'll hear today. No, seriously, it's a highly technical, industry-specific update. Senate Bill 581 is brought on behalf of the Surveying and Mapping Society of Georgia. That's the professional organization that represents the professional land surveyors of Georgia. This bill will update the way that land surveys measure. Specifically, the National Geodetic Survey will replace the vertical and horizontal datum or measurements of the National Spatial Reference System to overcome the current system's shortcomings. Listen to this. This is very compelling. The current datum from 1983 is actually off by a factor of 1 meter, or 3.3 feet from coast to coast. Can you get over that? We cannot let this stand. So this bill will put land surveying in Georgia on par with requirements from federal agencies such as FEMA and USGS for measurement. Additionally, gentlemen and ladies of Georgia, this esteemed body, this bill also addresses a conversion from the international unit, which is a meter, to feet. There are currently 2 types of feet. This is kind of bizarre. 2 types of feet in statute. Who knew? Didn't learn that in grammar school. The U.S. survey foot, and then there's an international foot. And there's a 1/100th difference between those 2 things. This cannot stand. It is not consistent. This bill won't require anyone to buy new equipment. It was driven by federal agencies such as the National Institute for Standards and Technology, the NGS, National Ocean Service, and the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. Mr. President, I'll be happy to answer any questions. I'm quite knowledgeable about this subject matter, so welcome any questions.
Senator, a star is born. The senator from the 53rd has his light on, but he appears to be in the well, so I can't understand. Senator 53rd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, yield.
I will certainly yield.
You said something about vertical datum. Could you explain that? Don't wait on the transportation. Give it to me now.
Mr. Chairman, certainly
I've had a bad day.
Everybody in this body certainly understands what that means, so I won't insult your intelligence by trying to explain it.
It's already insulted. So you have no explanation for that term you used earlier?
I think I explained it quite clearly.
Okay. Senator Further,
Yes.
Isn't it true that I used to have a high regards for you? It's kind of gone down lately. But tell me your motivation for this whole issue. Tell me why you brought this bill forward.
We want to have accurate surveys, and we want to be in compliance with the national standards so that
Georgia can continue to have accurate property records and a thriving economy.
So are you trying to improve your vertical datum?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, I don't think there'll be any other questions, so I yield the well.
Mr. Senator, you have multiple questions.
I ask for your favorable consideration.
Senator,
I yield the well.
Senator, you have multiple questions. Inquiring minds want to know.
Okay. All right.
Senator from the 47th recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
Would the senator yield?
I will yield.
Could you tell me what the definition of a meter is?
Well, since you're an agricultural engineer, I'm sure you already know that. But I'd like you to share that with us.
Well, thank you. So it's defined by the speed of light in 1/299,472,238 of a second. Said how fast that speed of light will travel in a vacuum. But when you talk about this, I want to know, after we change this, does Chattanooga, Tennessee become in Georgia, or do we become part of Tennessee?
Ah, that's for each and every member to decide for themselves. Thank you. I yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Senator from the 52nd. Senator from the 52nd, did you want to speak to the measure? He waves off. The chair hears none. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is the objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question on the passage of the bill. All those in favor vote yea. The opposed vote nay. Mr. Secretary, if you unlock the machines. Next year. I want to ask you. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 50, the nays are 1. This bill, having received a requisite constitutional majority, is thereby passed. Recognize the senator from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent to remove Senate Bill 556 from the table.
The senator from the 14th has asked to remove Senate Bill 556 from the table. Mr. Secretary, if you read the caption.
Senate Bill 556, a bill by Senators Thompson of the 14th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 5 of Title 40 of the OCGA relating to issuance, expiration, and renewal of driver's licenses, so as to provide for the issuance of a driver's license to current and retired peace officers at no charge, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Public Safety recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Albers of the 56th District Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Public Safety offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 556, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 5 of Title 40 of the OCGA relating to issuance, expiration, and renewal of driver's licenses, so as to provide for the issuance of a driver's license to current and retired peace officers at no charge and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
The senator from the 14th is recognized to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. I bring before you Senate Bill 556. We all know that our law enforcement officers put their life on the line each day to try and protect us. This bill is very simple. All we're simply trying to do is mirror what we do for military individuals. We're going to allow peace officers, retired and active, to be able to renew their license without a charge. With that, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent and yield the will.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? The chair hears none. The question on adoption of the committee substitute is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is thereby adopted. Is there objection to the agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. Mr. Secretary, if you unlock the machines. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 51, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is thereby passed by a substitute. Recognize the senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask that Senate Bill 565 be removed from the table.
Mr. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 565, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 10 of Title 17 of the OCGA relating to procedure for sentencing and imposition of punishment so as to provide that at any time after conviction for a misdemeanor or felony offense, a defendant convicted of an offense and sentenced as a direct result of being a victim of trafficking for labor or sexual servitude and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Judiciary recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Strickland, the 17th District Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Judiciary Committee offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 565, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 10 of Title 17 of the OCGA relating to procedure for sentencing and imposition of punishment, so as to provide that at any time after conviction for a misdemeanor or felony offense, a defendant convicted of an offense and sentenced as a direct result of being a victim of trafficking for labor or sexual servitude and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
The senator from the 17th has moved to take it from the table. Is there objection? Hearing none, the senator from the 17th is recognized to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. Senate Bill 565 is some cleanup and expansion of a law we passed a couple years ago that allows victims of human trafficking to apply for vacature, to have their sentence actually vacated, which means the whole offense goes away, a criminal offense, your fines and fees are repaid to you. If you can show that you committed an offense as a direct result of being a victim of human trafficking, a very strong standard to meet. With this bill, we're doing two things. One, instead of saying you have to wait 6 months after conviction and sentencing of a misdemeanor and 1 year after you complete the sentence of a felony to even apply for this, you can apply at any time. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have this waiting period for someone that can show they were charged and convicted of a crime because they were a victim of human trafficking. So it does away with that waiting period. Second thing it does is it clears up where the money is going to come from to reimburse people the fines and fees. This idea came from some folks that have worked on the ground representing victims of these kind of cases, and we're seeing different results around the state as to how we get the money back to these victims. With that, Mr. President, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
You have no questions, Senator.
I ask for your support of Senate Bill 565.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? The chair hears none. The question on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is thereby adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question now being ordered? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. Mr. Secretary, if you'd unlock the machines.
We're going to do the next bill, 539, and then break out.
Okay. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 49, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is thereby passed by substitute. You want to do that now? No. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, we will break for... I stand corrected. I will recognize the senator from the 50th. For a motion. Recognize the senator from the 50th for a motion.
Mr. President, I move for unanimous consent to take Senate Bill 539 off the table.
Mr. Secretary, if you'd read the caption.
Senate Bill 539, a bill by Senators Hatchett of the 50th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 3 of Chapter 11 of Title 16 of the OCGA related to wiretapping, eavesdropping, surveillance, and related offenses, so as to provide that the use of any device to photograph or record patients in a healthcare facility shall be unlawful and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services recommend that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Watson, the 1st District Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 539, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 3 of Chapter 11 of Title 16 of the OCGA relating to wiretapping, eavesdropping, surveillance, and related offenses, so as to provide that the use of any device to photograph or record patients in a facility operated by a county board of health shall be unlawful and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
The senator from the 50th have moved to take Senate Bill 539 from the table. Is there objection? Hearing none, call upon the senator from the 50th to present the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to my friend from the 29th for the clarification there. Today I bring Senate Bill 539. This is an agency bill for the Georgia Department of Public Health. They've had several issues in their health departments where individuals will come into waiting rooms and into other areas of the health department and film and take pictures. It's basically a way to harass individuals. When the health departments would call on law enforcement didn't have the authority to prevent these people from recording or taking pictures of patients in the waiting areas or in the facilities. And what this does is this just extends that protection to individuals, and it says you can't record or take photos of a patient in one of these facilities without their consent. I want to point out that this does not apply to general security surveillance of public areas or otherwise public spaces by property owners. And Mr. President, I'll be happy to yield for any questions.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? The chair hears none. The question is on adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to report of the committee is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none. The main question is now ordered. The question on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. Mr. Secretary, unlock the machines. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 48, the nays are 3. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is thereby passed by substitute. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, we will break and return at 3:30. And we will be having a Senate Finance Committee meeting in room 450. Senate Finance members, please go to room 450 for your committee meeting. We will reconvene at 3:30 promptly. Thank you.